The main purpose of the Constitution was to limit and restrict the federal government, and the purpose was to protect liberty. This is what the goal should always be in a free society, the protection of individual liberty. It is with those conditions where we as individuals then can strive for excellence and virtue, which is a personal matter. And if you choose not to strive for excellence and virtue, you don't have to, but you can't expect the government to take care of you forever either.
Watch out, Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney. We are getting word out of Iowa that Ron Paul is now drawing some of the biggest crowds of the primary season. Young, energetic, and enthusiastic voters reportedly finding something they like in his libertarian, smaller government, lower spending message. In the latest polls in the First in the Nation caucus state, they show Ron Paul running a strong third. This is the Fox News poll. Look at this. Gingrich 36, Romney 23, Paul at 12%. And wait until you see the Real Clear Politics average. The presidential candidate joins us live now from Mason City, Iowa. Congressman, thanks so much for being back on the program.
You're welcome. Nice to be with you.
So here you are in the Fox News poll, third in Iowa. And then when we look at the Real Clear Politics average, this is the national average for Iowa. For Iowa, you are tied for second, sir. It shows Gingrich at 29.8, Romney at 17.4, and you at 17.4. You think you're going to win this state?
No, we can, because I can find some polls that show me you're doing a little bit better than that. So, no, we're doing very well. And like you mentioned, the crowds are very good. You know, last night at Iowa State, we had over 1,300 young people came out. That was pretty exciting for me and for them.
Now, one of the messages we talked about in the introduction, and my apologies, sir. Gosh, you look cold. You look so cold. Is it 7 degrees in Iowa? That's what I heard.
Yeah, it's a little bit chilly. I don't think we're going to be playing any golf this afternoon.
Oh, poor thing. I'll see you there next week. But, right now in the studio it's 75, so I'm sleeveless. Okay, let me ask you about your message, because, you know, we talked about smaller government, and we heard in the soundbite about how people really need to pick themselves up, not rely so much on big government. It seems like President Obama is out there with a very different message and has been hitting it hard this week, talking about how the Republican Party just wants to leave the middle class to fend for themselves. And that may be resonating with some lower income and some middle income voters, thinking you, the GOP, you don't want to do anything to help us. What say you?
Well, you know, I think what's happening is the American people are way ahead of the politicians in Washington, including the president and the Congress. I think the people have realized that the promises by big government have failed in not delivering. And even those who have been receiving and those who have had paid, both of them realize that we're coming to an end. This planned economy, big spending, deficits, printing money, endless wars, it's all coming to an end, and they're not dealing with it. Even in Washington, when they talk about cutting, they're not talking about cutting anything. They're talking about cutting proposed increases, and the American people see through this, especially the crowds I'm talking to know very much that is the case. So when I talk about cuts, I talk about real cuts the first year, like $1 trillion. And I get a good applause from talking in this language because the American people are sick and tired of what they're getting right now.
One of the areas on which you've been most controversial is foreign policy. And this week there was an interesting forum that all the Republican candidates for president were invited to, except for you. It was the GOP forum on Israel. And you would have been the lone dissenting voice on America's policy with respect to Israel. Your thoughts, sir, on being excluded from offering your voice?
No, it's pretty strange. I guess only those people who excluded me can give you the real answer. But I think it's rather strange that they don't want debate, or they don't want a discussion, because I take a very strong position that's pro-Israel. Matter of fact, I'm the one that defends the sovereignty of Israel. I don't want Israel to be beholding to us. And I think when they depend on us, they have to do what we tell them. Matter of fact, a Jewish writer came to my defense just the other day and said Ron Paul really understands Zionism, because the two basic principles of Zionism is independence and self-reliance. And even Netanyahu this year before the U.S. Congress said, we don't need American troops to defend us. We can take care of ourselves. So I'm just sort of talking a language that some people in this country don't want to hear, and yet there's a full discussion of these views in Israel itself. So the whole idea of not having full discussion election. That is one issue that I think is, sort of should be challenged. So, but I think my message is getting out. I think everybody knows that I want Israel to be our best friends. I just don't want I don't want Israel to be dependent on us. I want them to determine their borders and determine what they want to do, and that they don't have to ask us permission to do what they think is best in their best interest.
I want to ask you about another comment that you made out in Iowa this week, where you talked about what happened after 9/11. You're notoriously anti-war. You want the troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan, and don't want us getting involved in any military conflict with Iran. And what you said was, quote, think of what happened after 9/11. The minute before there was any assessment, there was glee in the administration because now we can invade Iraq. Do you really believe, Congressman, that there was glee in the Bush administration after 3,000 American citizens died?
They might not describe it that way, but there was a lot of pleasure. And matter of fact, Bob Woodward quotes him in the book. He quotes the president, said this gives us an opportunity because we don't have to go after the people responsible for this directly. We can go after others. And, if you look at what Paul O'Neill said on the very first meeting, the board, the cabinet meeting in 2001, months before 9/11, he was dumbfounded that the whole agenda was going into Iraq. So, yes, the neoconservatives, even years before this, were looking for an opportunity. This doesn't mean they had glee about 9/11. That's a total misinterpretation. They had pleasure in knowing that they had an excuse now to do what they've been wanting to do for so long. And what did they do? They marched into Iraq based on lies. There was no Al-Qaeda, no weapons of mass destruction, and look at the tragic outcomes from that effort. Undeclared war, and matter of fact, that's carried over into Afghanistan. It looks like it won't ever end unless we change the administration.
And quickly, Congressman, let me ask you, because I know you're doing well in the polls in certain states, but everybody wants to know if you would seriously consider, if you don't get the GOP nomination, a run as an independent. Many believe that would fracture the GOP party and hand victory to President Obama.
Within weeks to go for this primary, and to find out that we may come in first, it's not on my mind, believe me.
All right, let me sneak in one more question before I let you go, and that is, the NLRB has now dropped its lawsuit against Boeing. And that got a lot of coverage, and it was about Boeing and whether it was trying to avoid certain union rules and so on. Now it's dropped that lawsuit after Boeing struck a deal with one of the unions. Your reaction?
Well, it's good. I hope they weren't forced to accept a deal that they shouldn't have, because I don't even believe in the NLRB. I think companies should go and come where they want, but anything that would encourage or discourage a president from arbitrarily using the Interstate Commerce Clause to stop commerce and people moving back and forth. The Interstate Commerce Clause should have protected that. It should have been absolutely unconstitutional. I would have liked the decision to be made on constitutional grounds that a president or anybody else has no authority to prevent one company from going from one state to another. That was prohibited by the Constitution.
Ron Paul, we'll see you next Thursday night in Iowa.
Thank you.
Stay warm. Gosh, it looks cold, doesn't it? Well, coming up, Congressman Paul was one of the first candidates to declare that he would not take part in the Donald Trump debate that's moderated later this month. It's a Newsmax debate that Trump is moderating. And Mitt Romney this week also adding his name to the list and saying he will not be taking part, among others.